Greetings, and welcome to A Year of Movies, a Planet Geek production. For this project, we are using the Ivan Walters reference book of 365 films to watch on the day they happened. Each day, we watch a movie associated with the date we are watching it on.
And as it is the 13th of August, we are going to be watching Battle of Britain from 1969. Directed by Guy Hamilton and starring Laurence Olivier. So to begin with, I do know of this movie from seeing the poster and knowing who is in the actual movie itself, but it isn't until this actual viewing that I have actually watched this movie. And that being said, like I already mentioned, that this movie does star Laurence Olivier, but it also stars Trevor Howard, Christopher Plummer, Michael Caine, Robert Shaw, and Susanna York. At a seminal moment in World War II, British Air Chief Marshal Sir Hugh Dowding, played by Laurence Olivier, must rally his outnumbered pilots against Hitler's Führer Luftwaffe. Besieged by German bombing runs, the Brits encounter with an aggressive air campaign of their own. Within months, the Nazis find themselves on the run thanks to Dowding's tactical genius and the work of talented squadron leaders, played by Michael Caine and Christopher Plummer, and other brave patriots. So once again, we are dealing with World War II and how the Allied forces fought against the Germans. One of the things that I couldn't help but notice while watching this movie is the proper use of the actors that they had portraying these fighter pilots and officers, especially on the British side as well. Seeing a Christopher Plummer or a Michael Caine or a very young-looking Ian McShane, it takes total advantage of how well these actors can do. And of course, them being led by Laurence Olivier, it's a really interesting movie to see. Now, we do see both sides of the altercation. We see the British side as they are trying to not be completely overrun by the Germans, and we do see the German side as they plot towards what they believe to be a victorious strategy. Part of the Nazis, the Germans, when we see are translated, but not every single thing is translated into words on the screen. The typical yellow, so it stands out from everything. A lot of it seems to be truncated from what they are actually saying, and again, not every single thing is translated, just like key phrases, so it's interesting to see that you would just partially translate some of the language when why would you shoot extra words being said when they're not going to be translated for the audience. The movie is filled with some really spectacular aerial combat sequences. Now, there is some footage that is stock of dogfights and whatnot involving the planes that they do use for this movie. We do have a lot of actors sitting in cockpits for close-ups within fuselages and whatnot. But we also do see like full-size actual planes being driven across fields to take off during a bombing raid, which is quite spectacular. Also, we see a lot of pyrotechnics being used, a lot of gasoline-aided explosions destroying full-size aircraft that are still on the ground or blowing up buildings. The movie takes advantages of some miniature work as well, and there is some blue screen effects being optically used as well, which is kind of interesting at the time. Sometimes it looks really great, sometimes it's a little shoddy, but it is altogether quite engrossing to see something of this visual magnitude for the era. Now, there is a subplot of a romantic story going on between the couple of Colin Harvey and Maggie Harvey, which are Christopher Plummer and Susanna York, that sort of drags down the movie at certain points. But other than that, it's quite a good melodrama for a wartime picture. And it's when the Royal Air Force waits for the Germans to attack. It's the 13th of August of 1940 when the British radar allows them to spot the Germans before they reach England and alert their fighters, which happens 33 minutes into this 2 hour and 12-minute movie. And as it is the 14th of August, we are going to be watching 55 Days at Peking from 1963, directed by Nicholas Ray and starring Charlton Heston. So, when I brought up the actual poster for this particular movie, this did not look familiar whatsoever. Interesting cast that I can tell from the top of Ava Gardner and also David Niven being here. So I was definitely intrigued about this, but again, not really knowing what this particular thing is, other than apparently the movie took place in Peking for 55 days. And like I'd already mentioned, the three actors that are the top billing in this particular movie, but this also stars Flora Robson, John Ireland, Leo Genn, and Harry Andrews. So this is a historical dramatization of the Battle of Peking, a turning point of the Boxer Rebellion in China in 1900. When Dowager Empress Tizu, played by Flora Robinson, orders the Boxers, a group of Chinese secret societies, to massacre foreigners within China. A group of ambassadors, their families, and staff hold up in a diplomatic compound. Major Matt Lewis of the United States Marine Corps, played by Charlton Heston, leads the defense while romancing Russian Baroness Natalie Ivanov, played by Ava Gardner. So it was what I was expecting with the cast that we were given. It was a very fun movie to watch. Very well put together. Visuals are fantastic. It's kind of hard to tell whether or not everything was built from the ground up or it was pre-existing sort of environments. But it was an interesting concept. And I say concept as it's not taken from reality, because it definitely is. But the way it's portrayed in this particular movie. Now, there is a few things about it that are a little disconcerting. But again, we're dealing with the time that the movie was done in the mid-60s. So we do have quite a few non-Asian actors portraying Asian characters, as earlier the Empress herself, Flora, played by Flora Robson, is of British origin and not quite the Asian character that she should be. So there is a little bit of makeup trickery and all that, and there is a few other more prominent Asian roles that definitely are played by non-Asians in makeup. But again, it's the era and it's how things were done back then. Now, we have several battle scenes that happen within this walled-in compound, and they're really cool. A lot of really great stunts, a lot of pyrotechnics being done, and a lot of, like, wow, our actors are really getting into that sort of thing. There's a couple of harrowing sequences where Charlton Heston is up front where people are, like, explosions are going off and people are falling all over the place and whatnot. It's kind of neat. There is some miniature work of stuff being blown up and all that, but there's also some full-scale stuff being blown up, which is kind of neat to also see. The relationship between Major Lewis and the Baroness is an interesting diversion through part of it. While it doesn't seem like it's part of the story for them to be in a relationship, but they seems a little stilted at times. So I don't know if it was just something that was tacked on to sort of spruce up the storyline, because I highly doubt that relationship was written in the history books of what actually happened. But still, again, we're dealing with Charlton Heston, Ava Gardner, just doing fantastic. And again, I will sit down and watch any movie that has a David Niven performance in it. He doesn't go his over-the-top sort of way that he sometimes does, but it's always just a thrill to watch a performance by him. And practically near the end of it, the excursion, the event is the Chinese launch like one final desperate attack on August 14th, 1900. Just before the reinforcements arrive. And that happens at 2 hours and 24 minutes into this 2-hour and 34-minute movie. And when it came to the Academy Awards for that particular season, it ended up getting nominated for Best Song and Best Original Score. And as it is the 15th of August, we are going to be watching Victory from 1981, directed by John Huston and starring Michael Caine. So when it comes to this movie, it was a pretty big deal at the time when it came out, not only being a John Huston film, but also putting a Sylvester Stallone into this particular sequence of events. Now, I did not see this movie when it was originally released, but I did watch it on one of those, Super Channel first choice movie networks that we had in Canada at the time. And that probably would have been the last time I'd seen it. So it has been quite a few years since I've actually seen this movie. And like I'd already mentioned, that Michael Caine and Sylvester Stallone star in this movie. However, it also stars Max von Sydow, Tim Pigott-Smith, Daniel Massey, Clive Marison, Carol Laurie, and Anton Diffring. The head of a German POW camp, soccer enthusiast, Karl von Steiner, played by Max von Sydow, organizes a match between Nazi players and their Allied captors. Orchestrated as a way to push the Third Reich agenda, the high-profile game is set to feature an international team led by John Colby, played by Michael Caine, a veteran British player. While the team, which also includes Luis Fernandez, played by Pele, of Trinidad, trains for the match, Robert Hatch, Sylvester Stallone, plans a dangerous mass escape from the camp. So again, we go back to World War II to play out an escape movie. It is a often used trope, as it actually did happen quite often throughout World War II, especially when we had Allied prisoners coming together, putting all their ideas into one pile, and finding the people capable of doing this act of escaping from these POW camps set up by the Germans. This movie is no exception to that, but it does add the whole entire spirit of teamwork for the actual game itself of soccer. Whereas both sides, the Germans set up by Max von Sydow and the other Allied forces set up by Michael Caine, are strictly just working on the idea of an international game. Throwing in the wanting to escape Sylvester Stallone into the storyline is sort of almost like sabotaging the actual process for both sides. So other than the, I guess you can say, stunt casting of Pele as one of the international team members, it's really a well thrown together movie because we're dealing again with some great actors doing some fantastic work. However, the sore thumb that stands out in this movie is definitely Sylvester Stallone. It is clear that in 81, throwing a name like Sylvester Stallone into your movie will definitely sell you tickets. It'll definitely get you people in the seats to see what this is all about, because at the time, Sylvester Stallone was a hot commodity coming off of Rocky and Rambo and whatnot, so appealing to an international audience is a perfect way to put him in. Unfortunately, at the time, Sylvester Stallone hasn't quite gotten his acting chops under him, and what should have been a very well role still turns out to be the early Sly that a lot of people make parody of. He definitely doesn't seem to fit into the thing where he's actually shoehorned into the team as not being well skilled at the game of football slash soccer, depending on where you are in the world, but having to put him in goal where he doesn't have to run around the field and he can just like throw himself at the ball to try and block it. It just seems like a missed opportunity for probably some sort of young up-and-coming actor to have gotten the role, even though I guess technically at the time, Stallone was an up-and-coming wanting to be actor. So the game itself is played on August 15th, when the actual team arrives in Paris for this game. And that happens about an hour and 13 minutes into this 1 hour and 56-minute movie. And as it is the 16th of August, we are going to be watching The Patriot from the year 2000, directed by Roman Emmerich and starring Mel Gibson. So this is a movie that I did see shortly after it was actually released on home video. I definitely did not see this in the theater when it originally came out, but I did see it pretty sure, like, as its first release on rentable DVD. Again, one of those apartment group rentals is probably what it actually ended up being. Pretty much, I think that might have been the only time that I'd seen it, other than at this current time, almost 20 some odd years earlier to what I watched today. And like I had already mentioned, not only does this movie star Mel Gibson, but it also stars Heath Ledger, Jolie Richardson, Jason Isaac, Chris Cooper, Renee Auberge-Noir, and Tom Wilkinson. A widow farmer with a brave but brutal military past decides not to join up when the British arrive in 1776. However, when his son enlists and is later captured by the enemy, the former soldier must abandon his newfound pacifist principles in order to rescue his oldest son, and forms a regiment of Carolina Patriots whose guerrilla tactics prove pivotal to the U.S. war effort. So this was one in a long line of great box office results for Mel Gibson's movies, starting in the early 90s with the Lethal Weapon movies and whatnot, and carrying on forward through the next decade. He would have, I mean, prior to that, he did have the Mad Max movies, which were quite successful as well, but this is a lot of repeated big box office that had Mel Gibson as a lead actor. Some not as successful as others, but for the most part, it was a good bet that you'd be in you'd have a successful box office return by having Mel Gibson in your movie at this time. And when you do that sort of thing and you're able to populate the rest of the movie with very substantial actors, which this movie definitely does, you end up with a very entertaining movie. I believe this is probably the first movie that I could remember Jason Isaacs being in. Now, upon further watching movies, I've seen movies prior to the date of, like, the year that this movie came out, which was the year 2000. But this is probably the first movie that I'd seen in my existence of watching movies where I was able to notice who Jason Isaacs was. And I would go on to, like, follow his career closely because of the fantastic job he does as a heel in this movie. And again, Heath Ledger probably had seen his face in a couple movies prior to this, but he does such a fantastic job in this. And again, everyone along, including, like, even a great person who's showed up several times on this list of Tom Wilkinson, does just a fantastic job. Again, being a heel at to a point, not like the villain that Jason Isaacs is, but yeah, as the opposing side of the Americans, or the revolution happening at the time. Now, again, the movie is structured like a Civil War movie, how it reenacts sequences and how the military dealt with one-on-one confrontation on the battlefield, which, again, seems totally bizarre to figure that's how it's going to happen, but with the technology of the time, that's how stuff was played out, and the respect that other sides would have for the military process. We get into some really cool stunts and whatnot. We have a lot of really great effects, some really cool gore sequences at that point. We have a person becoming decapitated by a cannonball, which looked fantastic in the brief seconds that you see up on the screen. But some of the fighting sequence between our main cast gets the slow motion treatment, so it looks like it doesn't look as full-blown exciting as it should. There's a little bit of a pre-sell to some of the hits, unfortunately, but that being said, it's still an entertaining movie that deals with a fantastical time in US history. So once it's almost impossible to ignore, Benjamin Martin, played by Mel Gibson, along with his son Gabriel Martin, played by Heath Ledger, join up with the army and witness the colonists' defeat at the Battle of Camden on August 16th, 1780, which is about 47 minutes into this 2 hour and 45-minute movie. And when it came to the Academy Awards for that particular season, it actually ended up winning for Best Sound, Best Cinematography, and Best Original Musical Score. And as it is the 17th of August, we are going to be watching Gung Ho from 1943, directed by Ray Enright and starring Randolph Scott. So for the brief of seconds, when I saw this as the next movie on the list, I got kind of excited at being able to watch the 1986 Michael Keaton comedy Gung Ho. But as I scrolled further on, I realized, oh, we're dealing with another war movie. Needless to say, I really had no idea what this movie was or what it had to do with the time. Pretty much when the movie was released, I was expecting definitely a war movie, but more on that a little later. Like I already mentioned, not only does this movie star Randolph Scott, but it also stars Rob Cameron, Alan Curtis, Noah Berry Jr., Sam Levine, Robert Mitchum, Grace MacDonald, and Milburn Stone. During the Pacific phase of World War II, Marine Colonel Thornwald, played by Randolph Scott, puts together a special strike force to capture the Mankin Island, a strategic territory held by Japan. He goes out of his way to select soldiers who are rugged or unbalanced misfits, such as former boxer Pig Iron Matthews, played by Robert Mitchum, and yokel Rube Theodore, played by Rod Cameron. As the raid draws closer, Thornwald dispatches with all ranks and titles and trains his group using unconventional methods. So there's something a little unsettling about a movie that is released about a year after the events that the movie is supposed to take place. So the movie itself is in production during World War II to tell this story that happens within it. It is an actual occurrence. It is a real thing that happened, this situation. But the fact that the movie itself was being filmed shortly after the actual events really happened, because the events happened in 1942 and the movie is released in December of 1943. So there's not much time between, like I said, the events that they happened and when it actually was released. The movie itself is also kind of interesting because it has a very documentary style sort of way of telling its story, whereas in a good portion of the training sequences and all that is sort of voiceovered by a third-person voiceover by Randolph Scott to describe what's going on, to push the story further while we're seeing montage scenes go on, which happens quite a few times throughout, which again gives it that sort of documentary style. The misfits and unusual, the guys that he gets to help him out in this mission are definitely not your usual sort of soldier that would sign up for this sort of situation. There is a lot of, and again, it is at the time, there is a lot of racial prejudice, I guess, against the Japanese, especially at the time, after this happening, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, going right in afterwards to vindicate the American situation. And for a lot of it, we do have some camaraderie going on between the soldiers as they train in a very non-traditional way of training. The movie has some pretty cool action sequences once we actually get onto the beach and we start seeing the conflict play out in front of them. Surprisingly, there's a lot more blood being used in this movie, like actually not just like painted on blood or something like that. We actually have a couple of guys have blood trickling out of their mouth that they're being shot, or someone getting stabbed in the back and there's blood trickling out of that wound and whatnot. And it's an interesting thing to have seen, because From my knowledge, it really wasn't like that for what I can remember. And again, we're dealing with 43, so the movie is in black and white. One thing after watching this movie is that someone definitely cannot dismiss the propaganda, the American propaganda being played out in this movie, which again is the reason why this movie was probably put into production so quickly, just to raise the spirits of the those back at home that are dealing with the news of how the war is going at the time. And this is definitely a, hey, America is great sort of turnout for the movie itself. And like I said, seeing this movie is based on actual events. The actual landing on Makin Island happens on August 17th, 1942. And that is about 40 minutes into this 1 hour and 28-minute movie. And as it is the 18th of August, we are going to be watching Taking Woodstock from 2009, directed by Ang Lee and starring Dimitri Martin. So seeing this poster for the movie, I vaguely remember seeing advertisement for it. I don't think I ever did get around to seeing it, but I do remember seeing it up on the Blockbuster rental walls. But other than that, this was my first viewing of this movie. And like I already mentioned, not only does this movie star Dimitri Martin, but it also stars Imelda Stelton, Henry Goodman, Liev Schreiber, Jonathan Groff, Eugene Levy, Emil Hirsch, and Jeffrey Dean Morgan. In the summer of 1969, Elliot Tiber, played by Dimitri Martin, divides his time between Greenwich Village and the upstate ramshackle hotel El Maqam of his old world parents. When the proposed venue for an upcoming Woodstock concert falls through, Elliot steps in to play a pivotal role in the generation-defining event by helping the organizers secure Max Yazerg's, played by Eugene Levy, nearby farm for the festival and offering the El Monaco as the home base. So I am a fan of the Woodstock scene and whatnot, having grown up just slightly beyond the generation that basically was able to enjoy it. However, throughout my life, I've always had the experience of those older around me playing music from Woodstock. I'd seen several of the documentaries made about it and always found a very big interest in the movie, in the music itself, especially the event of the original 1969 version. Now, this is a interesting sort of take on the situation, a very lighthearted sort of look at the events, with an amusing look behind the curtain at how the performance of peace was played out, peace and love played out. The movie is filled with just a plethora of character actors that are bringing their full game forward to it. It's very amusing to watch. Some of the interactions, especially Henry Goodman and Imelda Stratton as Mr. and Mrs. T-Bird, play a wonderfully hilarious couple to Elliot's parents. That would be Dimitri Martin, who in himself is very hilarious in the movie as well. Now, one of the unfortunate things about the movie is that obviously they cannot afford the license for a lot of the music that we would have heard during actual Woodstock, but it's still nonetheless a very entertaining movie, especially when everyone comes around to enjoy the outcome of the resulting event of the concert going off roughly without a hitch. And on the last day of the festival happens to be August 18th, 1969. Which is about an hour and 47 minutes into this 2-hour movie. Now, before I go any further, I'd also like to state a month ago, I had this same sort of situation pop up. While I am following this list of movies that are placed out in front of me, my own personal choice today would have been definitely the August 18th, 1973 set Texas Chainsaw Massacre, as that would be the date that movie took place. But that wasn't on this list, so I watched this movie instead.
Greetings, and welcome to A Year of Movies, a Planet Geek production. For this project, we are using the Ivan Walters reference book of 365 films to watch on the day they happened. Each day, we watch a movie associated with the date we are watching it on.
And as it is the 19th of August, we are going to be watching Angela's Ashes from 1999, directed by Alan Parker and starring Emily Watson. So it definitely was something that was unable to be not known about when this movie came out, being based on the memoirs of Frank McCourt. It was definitely one that got a lot of attention when it came to the awards season for that particular year. However, I did happen to see this movie as part of a film study program I had taken quite a few decades ago, now that I do the math in my head, but I think it was the only time that I actually had seen the movie. And at the time we watched the movie and it got broken down into like conversations as we went through it. So I think this might have been my first full watch through of this entire movie. And like I already mentioned, not only does this movie star Emily Watson, but it also stars Robert Carlyle, Kyran Owens, Michael Legg, Carrie Condon, Pauline McLynn, and Susan Fitzgerald. In 1935, when it's more common for Irish families to leave their famine-stricken country for America, the impoverished McCourt family does the reverse. Following the sudden death of her daughter, her 7-week-old daughter, Angela, played by Emily Watson, and her unemployed alcoholic husband, Malachi Sr., played by Robert Carlyle, set sail from New York Harbor to Cork with their then 4 children. So to begin with, while this movie does span quite a few years in this young child's life, we definitely have to acknowledge the fact that we deal with 3 different actors playing the same role. Now, all the children are played by different actors as they all grow up, obviously. But because we are focusing on Frankie as our main character, we have 3 very well portrayals of the same child. Starting with the Joe Breen, whose face appears on the posters for the movie. Kyran Owens playing the middle version of Frank. And then we end up with Michael Liege as the almost adult version of Frank. And the 3 of them do a fantastic job. Each of them interacting with their mother, played by Emily Watson, doing a fantastic job to make it believable that this is the same person throughout the aging years that this movie covers. Now, this is definitely a touching film, but it is definitely very sad. The family really does not get a chance to achieve happiness that doesn't last more than practically an afternoon. A lot goes wrong with the family and their dealings with not only having to live in a small apartment, having no money, their father not being able to hold down a job, and any sort of money that he does end up getting gets drunk away. But it's, at times, like I said, it's very tragic, but it also seems to be humorous too, almost sometimes at the exact same moment. We get a voiceover from yet a 4th version of Frank that we actually do not meet, but it basically is a traveling narrator that helps the story move along smoothly enough. And from a very early age, Frank definitely wants to, by the time we hit middle version of Frank, he is definitely desperate to get himself back to America anyways that he possibly can. And that's a good portion of his story to do that. At one point, getting hired by a moneylender that goes by the name of Finnegan, played by Elaine Pollock. But Frank does start saving money to be able to go to America. And on his birthday, which is August 19th, 1948, he ends up confessing to St. Francis all of his sins, and then finds Mrs. Finnegan dead of a stroke. So he then ends up stealing half her money and destroys her ledgers. And that happens about 2 hours and 8 minutes into this 2 hour and 25-minute movie. And when it came to the Academy Awards for that particular season, it ended up being nominated for Best Original Score. And on that note, we're going to wrap up this particular episode and look off into the future to see what we're going to be watching for tomorrow, which is August 20th, and that is going to be The Three Faces of Eve from 1957. So until next time, go see a movie. This has been A Year of Movies, a Planet Geek production. Please be sure to subscribe, download, comment, share, rate, and review. Once again, another thanks to Ivan Walters for his book, A Year of Movies, 365 films to watch on the day they happened. Look for it online or at your local bookstore. Follow Planet Geek Productions on all of our social media. Through Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Tumblr, and Letterboxd, search for Planet Geek Productions. On X, former Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky, search for Planet Geek Pod. You can also reach out to us through email at planetgeekpod@gmail.com. Once again, thanks for tuning in, and until next time, go see a movie.